They say the moment your heart breaks, you hear it before you feel it. For me it sounded like laughter. Bright. Careless. Familiar. The rain tapped softly against the restaurant windows as I stood frozen outside the private dining room, my fingers wrapped around a small gift bag that suddenly felt 100 pounds heavier. Inside was the watch I had spent 3 months saving for. 3 months of skipped lunches. 3 months of extra shifts at the bookstore. 3 months because tonight was supposed to matter. Tonight was our 3rd anniversary. Tonight was supposed to be special. I checked my phone again. 7:42. Jason was already over an hour late. His text had arrived 20 minutes earlier. Running behind. Be there soon. Love you. Love you. The words blurred in front of my eyes. Through the narrow opening in the dining room door, I could see him perfectly. Jason wasn't running late. Jason wasn't stuck in traffic. Jason wasn't rushing to meet me. He was sitting across from another woman. His hand rested over hers on the white tablecloth. The same hand that used to hold mine during scary movies. The same hand that promised we were building a future together. She laughed at something he said. Then he leaned closer. Close enough that I didn't need to hear the conversation to understand everything. My stomach dropped. The gift bag slipped from my fingers and landed on the carpet with a soft thud. Neither of them noticed. The world didn't stop. Nobody gasped. No dramatic music played. That's the strange thing about heartbreak. It feels like an earthquake inside your chest while everyone else continues eating dinner. I turned around before they could see me. Before I could embarrass myself. Before I could cry. The elevator ride down felt endless. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel doors. 24 years old. Brown hair carefully curled for date night. Light makeup. A navy dress I could barely afford. I looked exactly like the woman I had been 2 hours earlier. But I wasn't her anymore. By the time I reached the parking garage, the rain was falling harder. Cold drops soaked through my jacket almost instantly. I climbed into my aging Honda Civic and locked the doors. Then I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My chest so tight I could barely breathe. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe my phone lit up. Jason's name appeared across the screen. I stared at it. 1 ring. 2 rings. 3. Then the voicemail notification appeared. A text followed seconds later. Almost there. Can't wait to see you. My vision blurred. Not because of the rain. Not because of the windshield. Because that was the exact moment something inside me finally shattered. I laughed. A strange broken sound that barely sounded human. Then I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quiet tears sliding down my face as the rain drummed against the roof of my car. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 20. I don't know. Time felt meaningless. All I knew was that I couldn't go home. Home was where every picture of us lived. Every memory. Every promise. Every lie. So I started the engine. The heater rattled to life. The dashboard clock glowed 7:58. Downtown Manhattan stretched ahead in a blur of lights and reflections. For the first time in 3 years I had nowhere to be. Nobody waiting for me. Nobody who cared where I went. I pulled out of the garage and drove into the storm. I didn't know it yet, but before this night was over I would meet a stranger. And that stranger would change everything. The city lights smeared across my windshield like watercolor paint as I drove without a destination. Red taillights. Yellow street lamps. Reflections dancing on rain-soaked pavement. Manhattan looked beautiful from a distance. Close it felt lonely. My phone buzzed twice more. Jason. Then again. Jason. I flipped it face down on the passenger seat and kept driving. For once I did not want explanations. I did not want excuses. I did not want carefully chosen words designed to make me doubt what I had seen with my own eyes. After nearly 40 minutes I found myself downtown near the river. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle. My gas tank was approaching empty. My heart felt even emptier. A glowing hotel sign caught my attention. Elegant. Quiet. The kind of place I usually walked past without entering. Tonight, I pulled into the circular driveway without thinking. The valet offered a polite smile as I climbed out of my car. I almost turned around. My soaked sneakers did not belong here. Neither did my 10-year-old Honda. Neither did I. but the warmth spilling through the glass doors pulled me inside. Soft piano music floated through the lobby. Crystal chandeliers reflected golden light across polished marble floors. Everyone looked composed, successful, untouched by heartbreak. I headed toward the hotel bar and slipped onto the last empty stool in the corner. The bartender approached with a friendly smile. I ordered the first drink that came to mind, then immediately regretted it. The glass arrived. I stared at it for several seconds before taking a cautious sip. Tasted terrible, bitter, sharp. Nothing like the glamorous escape movies had promised. I almost laughed. Across the room, people talked quietly. Business deals, vacation plans, anniversary dinners. Life moving forward as if my world had not collapsed 2 hours earlier. I lowered my eyes. That was when someone slid a folded white napkin across the polished bar toward me. I blinked, confused. The napkin stopped beside my hand. I looked up. A man sat one stool away. Tall, broad shoulders, dark charcoal suit. No wedding ring. No attempt to start a conversation. He simply nodded once toward the napkin before returning his attention to the glass in front of him. Took me a second to realize why. Tears. I had not even noticed them falling. My cheeks were wet. Embarrassment rushed through me. I grabbed the napkin quickly and wiped my face. "Thank you," I said softly. He gave a small nod. That was all. No questions. No pity. No awkward attempts to fix me. Somehow that made everything worse. Because kindness was harder to handle than sympathy. I stared down at the napkin in my hands. My chest tightened again. The stranger remained silent. Calm. Comfortable with the quiet. Minutes passed. The piano continued playing somewhere behind us. Finally he spoke. Not looking directly at me. Not pushing. Just one sentence. "Rough night." I let out a shaky laugh. "You could say that." He nodded as if he understood more than I had actually said. Then he returned to his drink. No follow-up questions. No curiosity. Just space. Real space. The kind nobody had given me in a very long time. I found myself staring at the rain beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe heartbreak. Maybe the strange comfort of talking to someone who knew absolutely nothing about me. Whatever it was, for the first time that night, I did not feel completely alone. The bartender eventually disappeared to help another customer, and somehow I was still sitting there beside a man whose name I did not know. Outside, the rain continued sliding down the glass in silver streams. Inside, the piano player had switched to slower songs. The crowd had thinned. Conversations softened into background noise. I glanced at the clock behind the bar. Almost 11. I should have gone home hours ago. Instead, I found myself staring into a half-finished drink while the stranger beside me quietly looked out at the city. It was strange. Usually silence made me uncomfortable. Usually I filled every empty space with nervous words. Tonight felt different. Tonight I was too tired to pretend everything was fine. My phone buzzed again. Then again. Then again. I did not need to look to know who it was. The stranger's eyes briefly shifted toward the glowing screen before returning to the window. "Bad news does not usually improve with repetition," he said calmly. I laughed despite myself. That might be the smartest thing anyone has said to me all day. He smiled slightly. The expression transformed his face for a moment. Less intimidating. More human. I finally turned my phone off completely. The silence that followed felt like taking a full breath after hours underwater. "Better," he said. "Better," I agreed. We talked after that. Not deeply at first. Just small things. The weather. Traffic. The terrible music playing in grocery stores. The kind of conversation people have when neither wants to discuss the real reason they are hurting. Eventually he asked what I did for work. I told him about the bookstore. About helping customers find novels they would probably never finish. About organizing author events and reading manuscripts during lunch breaks. He listened carefully. Really listened. Most people waited for their turn to speak. He did not. When I asked what he did, he took a sip from his glass and said, "I spend most of my time solving problems." That was it. No details. No impressive title. No bragging. Just a simple answer that somehow made me more curious. Midnight arrived before I noticed. The hotel lobby had grown quiet. Staff moved through the space collecting empty glasses and resetting tables for the morning. I should go, I finally said. The words felt heavier than they should have. He nodded. Probably. Neither of us moved. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows. Somewhere far below, a horn echoed through the streets. For a moment, neither of us seemed eager to return to our separate lives. Then he stood and offered his hand. Not dramatic. Not flirtatious. Just respectful. Like a gentleman from another era. I looked at his hand for a second before accepting it. Warm. Steady. Safe. I said. His expression softened. Ethan. The name settled somewhere in my memory. Nice to meet you, Ethan. Likewise, Emma. We walked toward the elevators together. My heartbeat felt strangely calm. The pain from earlier had not disappeared. Jason's betrayal still existed. The future still looked uncertain. But for the first time since leaving that restaurant, I was not thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what came next. As the elevator doors opened, Ethan glanced toward me. His eyes held something thoughtful. Something unreadable. Then he gave a small smile and said, "Sometimes the worst nights of your life end up changing everything." At the time, I thought it was simply a kind observation from a stranger. I had no idea how right he was. Sunlight found me before my memory did. Warm gold spilled across my face, pulling me slowly from sleep. For several seconds I stared at an unfamiliar ceiling and wondered where I was. My heartbeat immediately quickened. I sat upright too fast and looked around. The room was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across an entire wall, revealing a breathtaking view of Manhattan glittering. Beneath the morning sun, the skyline looked close enough to touch. My small apartment could have fit inside this suite 3 times over. Panic flickered through me. Then confusion followed. The last thing I remembered was sitting with Ethan in the hotel lounge. Talking. Laughing more than I had expected. Sharing stories about books and travel and mistakes neither of us fully explained. After that, everything felt blurred by exhaustion. I pushed the blanket aside and climbed out of bed. My clothes were neatly folded on a chair nearby. My purse sat untouched on a marble table. Nothing appeared disturbed. Nothing felt wrong. Just strange. Very strange. I crossed the room and looked out the massive windows. Yellow cabs crawled through the streets dozens of stories below. The Hudson reflected sunlight like liquid silver. Somewhere in the distance, a ferry cut across the water. The view alone probably cost more than my annual salary. That was when I noticed the note. A single folded card rested beside a steaming cup of coffee near the dining area. My name was written across the front in clean handwriting. Emma. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short message. I hope you got some sleep. You look like you needed it. Breakfast is available if you want it. No pressure. No expectations. Ethan. I read it twice. Then a third time. Something about the simplicity made me smile despite myself. No dramatic premises. No attempt to impress me. Just kindness. Genuine kindness. I glanced around the suite again. The silence told me he was already gone. Part of me felt relieved. Another part felt oddly disappointed. I carried the note with me as I wandered through the living area. Everything looked elegant without feeling cold. Books lined several shelves. Real books. Worn spines. Folded pages. Not decorations. A framed photograph sat on a side table. I could not make out the details from where I stood, but it looked personal. Human. The kind of thing powerful people rarely let strangers see. My phone suddenly vibrated inside my purse. The sound nearly made me jump. I pulled it out and stared at the screen. 23 missed calls. 15 text messages. Every single one. From Jason. My stomach twisted. The familiar pain returned immediately. Last night had not erased reality. It had only given me a few hours of breathing room. I opened the newest message. Please call me. We need to talk. I stared at the words for several seconds before locking the screen again. For the first time, I did not feel tempted to answer. Maybe because I already knew the truth. Maybe because somewhere between the rain and the sunrise, something inside me had started changing. I placed the phone back into my purse and reached for my jacket. That was when I noticed something resting beneath the note. A simple black business card. No flashy design. No unnecessary details. Just a name embossed in silver lettering. Ethan Blackwood. I frowned slightly. The name felt familiar, like something I had seen before but could not place. I slipped the card into my purse and headed toward the door. I had no idea that within a week, I would see that name everywhere. And when I finally discovered who Ethan Blackwood really was, I would struggle to believe the man from the hotel lounge and the man the entire city seemed to know were the same person. 1 week later, life had settled into something that almost resembled normal. Almost. I still worked my shifts at the bookstore. I still rode the subway home. I still ignored every message Jason sent. But every now and then, usually when the city grew quiet at night, I found myself thinking about Ethan. Not obsessively. Just enough to wonder whether that strange evening had actually happened. The business card remained tucked inside my wallet. I had never called. He had never reached out. Part of me assumed that was the end of it. Then Thursday arrived. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror adjusting the collar of my only professional blazer. The interview mattered. A marketing assistant position at Blackwood Media. Better pay. Better benefits. A real opportunity to move forward. My reflection looked nervous. 24 years old. Student loans. Tiny apartment. Too much uncertainty. But for the first time in weeks I felt hopeful. The company headquarters occupied an entire glass tower overlooking Midtown. The building seemed to disappear into the clouds. People in tailored suits moved confidently through the lobby, while I clutched my resume folder like a life raft. Marble floors reflected sunlight from towering windows. Everything looked expensive, successful, untouchable. A receptionist directed me toward the 27th floor. My stomach twisted during the elevator ride upward. By the time the doors opened, my palms were damp. The waiting area was crowded with other applicants. Some looked older, more experienced, more confident. I chose a seat near the back and tried to calm my breathing. Across the room, a massive television displayed company news and promotional videos. Employees celebrating product launches, charity events, corporate achievements. I barely paid attention until a familiar voice drifted through the speakers. My head snapped upward. The screen showed a crowded conference room. Cameras flashed. Reporters filled rows of chairs. At the center stood a man behind a podium. Tall, dark hair, calm eyes, perfectly tailored suit. My heart stopped. Ethan. For several seconds I could not move. Could not breathe. Could not process what I was seeing. The television graphic beneath his image made everything even harder to believe. Ethan Blackwood. Chief Executive Officer. Blackwood Global Holdings. The room seemed to tilt. Suddenly every strange detail from that night made sense. The suite. The view. The effortless confidence. The way people seemed drawn to him without understanding why. Ethan was not simply successful. He was one of the most powerful executives in the country. The reporter on screen asked a question about an upcoming acquisition. Ethan answered with calm authority. Every person in the room listened. Every camera remained focused on him. Yet all I could think about was the man who had quietly handed me a napkin while I cried in a hotel bar. The same man who never mentioned any of this. He never told me who he was. He never tried to impress me. He never used his position to make himself seem important. A movement near the elevators pulled me from my thoughts. Several employees suddenly straightened. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Curious I followed their gaze. The elevator doors slid open. My pulse immediately accelerated. Ethan stepped into the lobby. Real. Not on a screen this time. His eyes scanned the room briefly. Then they landed on me. Everything else disappeared. The noise. The people. The waiting area. For one impossible second, it felt as though we were the only two people in the building. And then, to my complete shock, a slow smile appeared on his face. My brain completely forgot how to function. 1 second I was sitting in a waiting area surrounded by applicants. The next, the most powerful man in the building was looking directly at me, as if he had been expecting to see me there. Ethan's smile was brief but unmistakable. Recognition. Genuine recognition. Then a group of executives approached him, and the moment disappeared. They surrounded him immediately. Men and women carrying tablets, schedules, and folders. People who looked important suddenly looked nervous around him. Ethan listened as they spoke, nodding occasionally while walking toward a set of private offices at the end of the floor. Just before he disappeared behind a glass door, he glanced back once. Only once. Somehow that felt more dangerous than if he had stared. Emma Carter? A voice called my name. I nearly jumped out of my chair. The interview. Right. I followed a hiring manager into a conference room and somehow survived the next 45 minutes. I answered questions, discussed marketing campaigns, explained my experience, smiled when appropriate. At least I hoped I did. The truth was half my brain remained focused on the man sitting somewhere inside the building. By the time the interview ended, I was exhausted. The hiring manager shook my hand. We will be in touch soon. Thank you for your time. I stepped back into the hallway and headed toward the elevators. The doors opened. I entered. Just as they were about to close, a hand appeared between them. The doors immediately slid back apart. My pulse spiked. Ethan stepped inside. Alone. The elevator suddenly felt much smaller. Much quieter. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The doors closed. 27 floors remained between us and the lobby. That was a long time to stand beside someone who occupied far too much space in my thoughts. You got the interview, he said finally. His voice sounded exactly the same as it had that night. Calm. Warm. Familiar. I stared at him. You knew I was interviewing here? His mouth curved slightly. I own the company, Emma. That tends to come with access to information. Fair point. A soft laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Ethan looked pleased by that. You never told me who you were, I said. No, I did not. Why? He considered the question. Then he shrugged lightly. Because that night you needed a friend, not a business card. The answer hit harder than it should have. Most people with his level of success would have mentioned it within 5 minutes. Ethan had spent hours talking to me without once bringing up his accomplishments. The elevator continued descending. 20 floors. 19. 18. How did the interview go? He asked. I think it went well. I hope so anyway. It went well, he said confidently. You sound very certain. I am. The corners of his eyes crinkled slightly. I found myself smiling back. When had that become so easy? The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. People immediately noticed him. Employees straightened. Security nodded respectfully. The atmosphere shifted around him without him doing anything at all. Power did not need to announce itself. Sometimes it simply entered a room. Ethan stepped aside, allowing me to exit first. A small gesture. A gentleman's gesture. One I noticed. One I remembered. As we crossed the lobby together, my phone suddenly vibrated. I glanced down automatically. Jason's name filled the screen. The smile vanished from my face. Ethan noticed instantly. His expression changed. Not anger. Not jealousy. Just concern. Everything okay? He asked quietly. I slipped the phone back into my purse. Not really. Ethan studied me for a moment. Then he nodded once. The look in his eyes told me he understood far more than I had said. And for some reason, that scared me almost as much as it comforted me. 3 days later, I received the job offer. I read the email 4 times before believing it was real. Better salary. Health insurance. A future that suddenly looked brighter than it had in months. I accepted immediately. My first week at Blackwood Media passed in a blur of orientation meetings, new passwords, and information overload. The office occupied 3 entire floors of the tower. Modern glass walls. Open workspaces. Endless coffee. Everyone moved quickly. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing except me. I kept waiting to see Ethan again. Part of me hoped I would. Another part hoped I would not. Seeing him always seemed to complicate my ability to think clearly. On Friday evening, I left the office just after 6. The sky had already begun fading toward dusk. Summer heat lingered between the buildings as people flooded the sidewalks. I was halfway to the subway entrance when someone called my name. Emma. My entire body tensed before I even turned around. Jason stood across the sidewalk. My stomach immediately dropped. He looked tired, unshaven, nervous, like someone who had not been sleeping well. For a brief moment, I remembered the man I had loved for 3 years. Then I remembered the restaurant, the other woman, the lies. The memory hardened something inside me. What are you doing here? I asked. I have been trying to reach you. I noticed. Emma, please. Just give me 5 minutes. I almost kept walking. Almost. But unfinished conversations have a way of following you forever. Fine, I said. 5 minutes. Relief flashed across his face. We moved toward a quieter corner near a small plaza. The city noise softened around us. Jason ran a hand through his hair. I made a mistake. The words came quickly, as though he had rehearsed them. I never wanted to hurt you. It meant nothing. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was. The sentence nearly every betrayed person eventually hears. It meant nothing. Somehow that always made it worse. If it meant nothing, then why risk everything? Emma, I love you. I made one terrible decision. One. I stared at him. You lied for months. That is not one decision. His face fell. The silence stretched between us. People walked past carrying shopping bags and coffee cups, completely unaware that my past was standing in front of me trying to rewrite history. Jason stepped closer. Not aggressively. Just desperately. We can fix this. We can start over. Please. I felt tired. Not angry anymore. Just tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes when your heart finally accepts what your mind already knows. No, Jason. We cannot. His expression crumpled. Then his eyes shifted past me. Confusion crossed his face. I turned instinctively. A black sedan had just pulled to the curb. The rear door opened. Ethan stepped onto the sidewalk. My heartbeat immediately betrayed me. He was not wearing a suit jacket today. Just dark slacks and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. Somehow he looked even more confident. More approachable. More dangerous to my peace of mind. Ethan's gaze landed on me first. Then on Jason. He took in the entire situation within seconds. His expression remained calm. Professional. But something sharpened in his eyes. Jason looked between us. You know him? He asked. Before I could answer, Ethan reached us and offered a polite nod. Good evening, Emma. The sound of my name in his voice felt strangely reassuring. Like the arrival of solid ground after weeks at sea. And for the first time since Jason appeared, I realized I was no longer facing the past alone. Jason looked uncomfortable immediately. Not because Ethan had said anything threatening. He had not. Ethan's voice remained calm. Polite. Professional. Yet somehow the entire atmosphere shifted the moment he arrived. Jason straightened his shoulders. Ethan offered his hand. Jason hesitated before shaking it. Ethan Blackwood. The introduction was simple. Jason's eyes widened slightly at the name. Recognition flashed across his face. Almost everyone in New York recognized that name. Ethan released his hand and turned toward me. Everything okay? He asked. The concern in his voice was genuine. Not performative. Not possessive. Just concern. I nodded. Think so. Jason glanced between us. The silence stretched. Then he forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. Well, I should probably go. Nobody stopped him. Nobody argued. A few awkward seconds later, he disappeared into the crowd. The moment he was gone, I felt lighter. As if I had been carrying a weight I did not realize I was still holding. Ethan noticed immediately. You look relieved. I am. Good. We began walking without discussing it further. The evening air carried the scent of summer and distant rain. Office workers hurried past us while traffic crawled through Midtown. For several blocks neither of us spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Familiar. Finally I looked over at him. Thank you. For what? For showing up when you did. Ethan smiled faintly. That was luck, not planning. Somehow I doubted that. We stopped at a small coffee shop near Bryant Park. Nothing fancy. Just warm lights and quiet music. We found a table near the window. The city glowed outside. For a while we talked about ordinary things. Work. Books. Travel. Then the conversation slowed. Ethan stared into his coffee. The expression on his face changed. More distant. More thoughtful. You know, he said quietly, I understand why people stay longer than they should. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? He took a breath. 'Cause I did it too. The confession surprised me. Ethan never volunteered personal information. He usually listened more than he spoke. Years ago, he continued, I was engaged. I blinked. Somehow the idea of Ethan belonging to someone else felt strange. Serious enough that we planned a future. A wedding. A life. His voice remained calm, but something painful lingered beneath the words. What happened? He looked toward the window. She changed her mind. Not suddenly. Looking back, the signs were there. I just ignored them because I wanted the future I imagined more than the reality in front of me. The honesty caught me off guard. Most successful people told stories that made them look strong. Ethan told stories that made him look human. Did it hurt? I asked softly. A small laugh escaped him. More than I cared to admit. For a while I buried myself in work. Built companies. Expanded businesses. Collected achievements. Everyone assumed I was happy because I was successful. Were you? His eyes met mine. No. The answer came without hesitation. Just no. The simplicity made my chest tighten. For a moment I saw past the headlines in boardrooms and executive titles. I saw the man sitting beside me. The man who knew exactly what betrayal felt like. Then Ethan smiled gently. And then one rainy night, I met a woman at a hotel bar who reminded me that surviving is not the same thing as living. My heartbeat stumbled. The noise of the city faded around us. Neither of us looked away. And for the first time since that terrible night outside the restaurant, I realized I was no longer thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I might finally be ready to find. The weeks that followed felt different. Not because my life suddenly became perfect. It did not. I still worked hard. I still worried about bills. I still had moments when old memories caught me off guard. The difference was that I no longer faced everything alone. Ethan never tried to take control of my life. He never treated me like a project that needed fixing. He simply showed up. Consistently. Quietly. Honestly. Sometimes that meant coffee before work. Sometimes it meant long walks through Central Park on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes it meant sitting beside each other in comfortable silence while the city moved around us. One evening in early fall, we found ourselves on a rooftop overlooking Manhattan. The air carried the first hint of autumn. Below us, thousands of lights stretched across the city like stars scattered across the earth. I leaned against the railing and watched traffic flow through the streets far below. A year ago, I would have looked at this view and imagined success meant reaching the top of the tallest building. Standing beside Ethan taught me something different. Success meant having someone who made you feel safe enough to be yourself. Ethan stood beside me with his hands in his pockets. The wind moved through his dark hair. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then he broke the silence. Do you ever think about that night? I smiled softly. The rainy one? The worst night of your life. I considered the question carefully. The answer surprised even me. Sometimes. Do you regret it? I turned toward him. The city lights reflected in his eyes. No, not anymore. Ethan looked away briefly, almost as if gathering his thoughts. Then he exhaled slowly. I spent years building companies, acquiring businesses, expanding into new markets. Everyone said I had everything. Money, influence, success. The words sounded distant, meaningless. But I never felt like I had enough. Not because I wanted more. Because none of it filled the space that disappointment left behind. I listened quietly. He met my eyes again. Then you walked into a hotel bar carrying a broken heart, and somehow reminded me that life was still happening outside boardrooms and quarterly reports. My chest tightened. Ethan smiled. A real smile. The kind that only appeared when he forgot to hide it. You changed things for me, Emma. The city noise seemed to fade into the background. There was only him. Only this moment. Only the strange path that had brought us here. Months earlier I had believed my future was ending. Instead it had been beginning. I reached for his hand. He immediately intertwined his fingers with mine. Natural. Effortless. Right. Ethan looked out across the skyline one final time before speaking again. His voice was quiet, almost lost beneath the wind. I built an empire. But you were the first thing I was ever afraid to lose. Emotion caught unexpectedly in my throat. Not because of the words themselves. Because I knew he meant them. Every single one. We stood there together as the lights of Manhattan glittered below us. Two people whose lives should never have crossed. Two people brought together by chance, heartbreak, timing, and a rainy night neither of us would ever forget. Looking back now, I understand something I could not see back then. Betrayal did not destroy my future. It redirected it. Sometimes the door that closes behind you is not a tragedy. Sometimes it is the reason you finally find the path that was meant for you all along.